So, what would happen if I gave every trainer in Pokemon Sapphire 6 Pokemon? Well, that's what we're here to find out today. For this challenge, I'm going to be using the traditional Nuzlocke rules alongside the hardcore Nuzlocke rules, and just some additional rules I've added for myself on a randomized version of Sapphire. If you're interested in trying the challenge yourself, I will leave a download link for my settings file in the description. Anyways, without further ado, let's begin our journey in the Hoenn region. Also, yes, I'm not doing nicknames this time because I'm lazy as fuck. We start our journey heading up north to Route 101 where we find Birch next to a briefcase. Our three starter options were Poliwag, Azurill, and Totodile. I decide to pick Totodile, I finish Little T-Tar fight and head up to Route 103 where we face our rival, who has an Azurill that we kill with a few scratches. I then head back to Birch's lab where we get the Pokeballs. I then go back to Route 101 where we encounter an Arbok that I catch after throwing a couple Pokeballs. I then go up to Route 103 where I catch a Bagon. After that I head west to Route 102 where I encounter a Magneton that I would end up catching after a couple Pokeballs. I then quickly beat up a couple trainers and eventually reach Petalburg. After reaching Petalburg, I stop by the gym, do the catching tutorial, and then head over to Route 104 where I encounter a Vigoroth that I end up catching after throwing a few Pokeballs. I then go up to Petalburg Woods where I encounter an Arena Trap Mightyena that I easily catch. After that, I quickly do the Team Aqua fight in the forest and eventually reach the other side of Route 104 where I beat a couple trainers and reach Rustboro. I then head east to Route 116 where I catch a Poliwag. I then head a little bit farther east, beat up a couple trainers, and eventually reach Rust Turf Tunnel where I find a Sharpedo that is quite easily caught. However, while attempting to leave the cave, I run into an Ekans that after trapping in my Totodile with Wrap unfortunately kills me, giving us our first death. I then quickly head back to Rustboro City and add Sharpedo to the team. After adding Sharpedo to the team, I quickly level up everyone to the level cap and head into the Roxanne fight, leading Magneton, who easily takes out her Golbat with a couple Thunder Shocks. She then sets out Nidoran, so I swap into Mightyena, who kills the Nidoran, Shedinja, and Krabby as well. She then brings out Quillfish, so I decide to switch into Magneton, who finishes it off with a couple Thunder Shocks. She then sends out her final Pokemon, Cacnea, who I kill with a Scratch from Vigoroth after switching him in. And with that, we have gotten our first badge quite easily. Now that we beat Roxanne, I head over to Rust Turf Tunnel and quickly deal with the Aqua Grunt. I then head over to the southern part of Route 104 and go into Mr. Briney's house, who takes us to Dewford Town. After reaching Dewford Town, I pick up the old rod and then fish for and encounter a Nidoran female that I end up catching. I then head over to Route 107 where I catch a Hariyama. I then go up north to Route 106 where I catch a Sneasel. Finally, I get my last encounter and head over to Granite Cave where I encounter and catch a Cloyster. I then go through the cave and eventually reach Steven, who gives us the TM for Hydro Cannon. After that, I head over to the Pokemon Center to prepare for Brawly. I do this by replacing Bagon with Hariyama and then head into the gym, take out a gym trainer, and go right into the fight, leading with Magneton, who easily takes out his Girafarig. His Pidgeotto and Feraligatr are then sent out and killed. He then sends out his Lotad, so I switch into Hariyama, who kills it after a Fake Out and Arm Thrust. After that, Chikorita is then sent out and killed after a Vital Throw. Finally, his last Pokemon, Roselia, is sent out in one shot after I switch into Vigoroth and hit it with a Tri-Attack. And just like that, we've earned our second badge. Now that I've beat Brawly, I head back to the Pokemon Center and then talk to Mr. Briney, who takes us to Route 109 where I encounter a Steelix that I end up catching. I then head up to Slateport where I find a Nidoran male that I weaken and then catch. I then get another encounter after heading up to Route 110 where I find a Combuskin that I catch after a few tries. I then head into the warehouse thing and talk to Doc. After that, I head over to the museum, pick up TM46, give the Devon Goods to Stern, and then easily take out both of the Aqua Grunts. After finishing the Team Aqua event, I head back to the Pokemon Center and then go back up to Route 110 where I beat up a couple trainers and then begin the rival fight with May leading Magneton, who I decide to immediately switch out of and instead send out Arbok, who paralyzes the Machop with Glare and gets a bit of damage off. I then switch into Hariyama, who finished it off after a couple arm thrusts. Her Curlia is then sent out, so I decide to switch into Mightyena, who easily takes it out with Bite. She then sends out Mew, who goes for Transform, which, well, let's just pause for a moment, as my Mightyena has Arena Trap and the move Howl, meaning I can't switch out and that she can set up because the AI obviously doesn't follow the same arbitrary no setup rules that I do. This basically leads to her Mew killing Mightyena, giving me my second death. After that, I send out Magneton, who easily finished it off with a Spark. She then sends out Quilava, so I switch out into Sharpedo, who kills it after a couple crunches. Her last two Pokemon, Feebas and Marill, are then easily dealt with, giving us the win. I then decide to head back to Slateport and put Poliwag on the team, who I level up and evolve. After that, I head back up to Route 110, beat the last couple trainers, and eventually reach Mauville. After reaching Mauville, I head over to Route 118, where I encounter a Mr. Mime that I unfortunately kill. I then head west to Route 117, where I encounter a Charizard that I easily catch. Finally, I get my last encounter up north at Route 111, which ends up being a Sunkern that I easily catch. After catching Sunkern, I head back to the Pokemon Center and replace Vigoroth with Charizard. I then go right into the Wally fight, leading Hariyama, who takes out his Feel quite easily. He then sends out Slowpoke, so I decide to switch into Sharpedo, who takes out everything except his last Pokemon, Quillfish, who I take out after switching into Magneton and hitting it with Spark. After that, I head into the gym, quickly take out the gym trainers, and go right into the gym fight, leading Hariyama, who gets a Fake Out off on the Heracross. I then switch into Charizard, who gets it to around half. I then switch once again to Arbok, who manages to get a Screech off. Finally, I send Hariyama back in, hit it with a Fake Out, and then finish it off with Arm Thrust. He then sends out a Pidgey, so I decide to switch into Magneton, who easily kills it, his Nidoran female, and his Fearow with Spark. He then sends out Grumpig, I get a Metal Sound off and decide to switch out into Sharpedo, who finishes it off with a Crunch. Finally, his last Pokemon, Pichu, is sent out and also taken out by a Crunch, and just like that, we earned our 3rd badge. Now that I beat Watson, I head back to the Pokemon Center and swap Charizard back for Vigoroth. I then head back to Slateport, pick up a Water Stone, and evolve Poliwhirl. After that, I head back to Mauville and pick up the HM for Rock Smash. I then head over to Verdanturf Town and then head into Rust Turf Tunnel to pick up Strength. Afterwards, I head over to Route 111, take out a couple trainers, and eventually reach Route 112, where I end up finding a Houndour that I catch. After that, I reach Fiery Path, where I encounter a Farfetch that I end up catching. I then reach the other side of Route 112, beat a couple trainers, and eventually reach Route 113, where I encounter a Scyther that after a few failed attempts, I ended up catching. We then beat even more trainers until we reach Fall Arbor Town. After reaching Fall Arbor, I quickly heal up and head over to Route 114, where I encounter a Registeel, which, as expected, exploded. Regardless, I managed to skip all the trainers and eventually reach Meteor Falls, where I catch a Medicham. I then do the Team Aqua and Magma stuff real quick. After that, I go back to Rustboro, go through Rust Turf Tunnel, and then head east from Verdanturf until I get to Mauville. Once there, I head over to the Pokemon Center and swap Arbok for Scyther to help cover my fighting weakness. I then go back up to Route 112 and use the cable car to reach Mount Chimney, where I quickly take out all the Aqua Grunts. I then decide to head right into the fight with Archie, leading Magneton, who easily one-shots his Pelipper. He then sends out an Arcanine, so I swap into Poliwrath, who unfortunately gets burned, but does get him quite low before he switches into Slowpoke. Because he switched into Slowpoke, I decide to switch back into Magneton, who one-shots it with Spark. The Arcanine is then sent back out, so I switch into Hariyama this time, who kills it after a Vital Throw and an Arm Thrust. His Rhyhorn is then sent out and easily killed after a Vital Throw. He then sends out an Armaldo, and while I do get some damage off, I decide to switch into Magneton, who kills it after a few Sparks. Finally, his last Pokemon, a Houndour, is sent out and easily dealt with after I switch into Vigoroth and hit it with Tri-Attack. Now that I've beat Archie, I head down to Jagged Pass, where I end up finding a Hoothoot that I catch after a few tries. I then eventually reach Laveridge, where I pick up the Wynaut Egg that ends up hatching into a Delibird. I now head into the gym and manage to skip all but one trainer. Once I reach Flannery, I level up all of my Pokemon at the level cap, which leads to Vigoroth evolving, and well, the Slacking ends up having Pure Power, and if you don't know what Pure Power does, it basically doubles your attack stat, or in more realistic terms, this thing is now broken as fuck. Regardless, I head right into the gym fight, leading Slacking, who kind of just demolishes her whole team, one-shotting her Exploud, Hariyama, Charmander, Oddish, and Grumpig. Her Seadra did manage to live, but it ended up going down the next turn anyway, and basically, yeah, just like that, we've earned our 4th badge. Now that we beat Flannery, I head back to the Pokemon Center and heal real quick. I then head over to the desert where I pick up the Root Fossil. I then go back to Verdanturf and through Rust Turf Tunnel to Rustboro City, where I revive my Root Fossil that ended up being a Girafarig. I then go through Petalburg Woods and the southern side of Route 104 until I eventually reach Petalburg City. While there, I get my encounter, which ends up being a Heracross that I catch. I then go back to the Pokemon Center and heal. After that, I go right into the gym, quickly take out some of the trainers, and begin the fight with Norman, leading Slacking. I then switch into Magneton, who immediately gets hit by a superpower from Registeel and dies. Regardless, I then send out Poliwrath, who after a little while eventually finishes it off with a Rock Smash. He then sends out Slacking, so I switch into my Slacking, who gets it quite low with Tri-Attack. I then switch into Hariyama, who hits it with an Arm Thrust. He then sends out Quilava, who Hariyama easily one-shots with Vital Throw. He then sends out a Dusclops, so I swap into Sharpedo, who unfortunately gets hit with a Curse, so I have to switch again into Scyther, and then back into Sharpedo, who then kills it with Crunch. His Beedrill is then sent out, so I switch into Slacking, who kills it, and his last Pokemon, Anorith, with Tri-Attack. And just like that, we've earned our 5th badge. Now that I've beat Norman, I head back to the Pokemon Center and add Charizard to the team. I then stop by Wally's house and get the HM for Surf. After that, I head over to Route 103, where I take the shortcut to Route 110. I then head north and eventually reach Mauville. While there, I talk to Watson, who tells us to go to New Mauville. So, I head over to New Mauville, and while there, I end up catching a Diglett. I then turn off the generator and head back to Mauville and talk to Watson, who gives us the TM for counter. I then head east to Route 118, where I pick up a Good Rod and talk to Steven. After that, I head up north to Route 119, where I encounter a Tauros that I end up catching. I then head farther up north, beating a trainer and eventually reaching the Weather Institute. While there, I heal up, beat a couple of grunts, and then run to the Aqua Admin Shelly, who I easily shit on with Slacking and Scyther. After beating Shelly, I begin heading to Fortree City, but we run to May first, so I begin this fight leaving Sharpedo, who manages to easily take out her Psyduck. She then sends out Chikorita, so I swap into Charizard, who one-shots it with Wing Attack. Her Azumarill is then sent out next, so I decide to switch into Slacking, who then one-shots the Azumarill, and the 3 other Pokemon, giving us the easy win. I then go a little bit farther up north and eventually reach Fortree City. After I get there, I quickly
quickly stop at the Pokemart, pick up some Great Balls. I then head east to Route 120 where I catch a Shroomish. I then run to Steven, who gives us the Devon Scope. After that, I quickly run away from the invisible Kecleon and then head back to Fortree to heal up. After healing up, I head right into the gym and take out both of the unskippable trainers and eventually reach Winona. After that, I begin the fight with Winona, leading Slacking, and proceeds to one-shot her Smeargle, Metapod, and Vaporeon. She then sends out Dusclops, so I switch into Sharpedo, who one-shots with Crunch. She then sends out Electabuzz, so I switch back into Slacking, who then kills the Electabuzz and her last Pokemon Magmar, giving us the easy win, and with it, the 6th badge. Now that I've beat Winona, I head back to the Pokemon Center and level up my team, which leads to Scyther evolving. After that, I head east back to Route 120, where I quickly take out a few trainers and eventually reach Route 121, where I find and catch a Phanpy. I then head to Route 122, where I end up catching a Slowpoke. Finally, I reach Mount Pyre, quickly get my encounter, which ends up being a Murkrow that I failed to catch. Not that it matters anyway, because Murkrow sucks ass. I then quickly take out a few Aqua Grunts at the top of the mountain, and then head back to Route 121, where I take out a few more trainers before I eventually reach Lily Cove City. Now that I've reached Lily Cove, I head over to the department store where I begin the fight with May, leading with Slacking, who I immediately switch out of and instead send in Scizor, who takes out a Graveler after a couple Fury Cutters. She then sends out a Azumarill, so I switch back into Slacking, who takes it and her next two Pokemon out with Tri-Attack. She then sends out Metagross, so I switch into Charizard, who one-shots with Flamethrower. Finally, her last Pokemon Mew is sent out and then easily one-shot after I switch into Sharpedo and hit it with a Crunch. Now that we beat May, I head into the department store to check the randomized shops, and one of them ends up having a Choice Band, which definitely not broken at all. Regardless, I then fly over to Slayport, do a little story stuff, and then fly back to the Aqua Base, easily taking out Matt, or whatever the fuck his name is. After that, I head east to Route 124, where I catch an Armaldo. I then reach Moss Deep City. Upon reaching Moss Deep, I head to the Pokemon Center, heal up, and then catch a Zubat. After that, I head over to Route 125, where I find a Plusle that I unfortunately kill. I then go into Shoal Cave and encounter and easily catch an Omanyte. After that, I head back to Moss Deep and into the gym, where I take out a couple trainers and eventually reach Tate and Liza. Also, before anyone mentions it, yes, I'm one level below level cap, because Wallace's level cap is 56, and I'll probably go over if I go any higher. Regardless, I begin the fight leading Slacking and Charizard, who easily take out their Wailord of Magneton. After that, they then send out Rhydon and Exploud, so I switch out Charizard and Poliwrath and hit Exploud with a Tri-Attack, killing it. They then send out Swallow, so I switch out Poliwrath and send out Hariyama and hit the Swallow with a Tri-Attack, killing it. They then send out another Rhydon, one of which I get low after a couple Tri-Attacks, and the other hit my Hariyama with a fucking Horn Drill, giving me my 4th death. After that, I send out Poliwrath, who finishes both of them off with Surf, giving me the win, and with it, my 7th badge. Now that I've beat Tate and Liza, I go back to the Pokemon Center and add Heracross to the team. I then head over to Steven's house to pick up the HM for Dive. After that, I go to Route 127, where I catch a Lanoon. I then use Dive and eventually reach the entrance for Seafloor Cavern. Upon getting there, I catch a Pidgeotto, beat a couple trainers, and then face Archie. I begin the Archie fight leading Slacking, who I immediately switch out of and into Sharpedo, who one-shots his Gengar with Crunch. He then sends out his next Pokemon Venomoth, so I decide to switch into Charizard, who was immediately put to sleep and unfortunately doesn't wake up, so I'm forced to switch, and I send out Slacking, who also gets put to sleep and wouldn't wake up. Finally, I switch into Scizor, who manages to kill it with a Wing Attack. He then sends out Entei, so I switch into Poliwrath, who kills it after a couple surfs. His Ursaring's then sent out, so I hit it with Submission, and then switch into Sharpedo, who immediately gets one-shot and dies. Now, let's just pause for a moment, as this was actually a very crucial mistake, as I don't know if you've looked at my team, but Sharpedo was my only counter to his second last Pokemon, Moltres. Regardless, I then decide to send out Heracross, who kills the Ursaring with Brick Break. His second last Pokemon, Moltres, is then sent out, and just to skip over everything, I basically lose 4 Pokemon, and I then send out Charizard, but the AI decided to switch out and send in his last Pokemon, Kingdra, who kills my Charizard anyway. Well, it seemed like it was over. I then sent out my Slacking, who manages to wake up, one-shot the Kingdra and the Moltres, just barely giving me the win. Anyways, after that disaster of a fight, I head back to the Pokemon Center and rebuild by adding Combuskin, Bagon, Slowpoke, Steelix, and Shroomish to the team. After adding them to the team, I quickly level them up and then head over to Route 126, where I dive and then get my underwater encounter, which ends up being a Chikorita that I managed to catch after throwing a few Pokeballs. I then go back to the surface and enter Stopolis City, where I catch a Chinchou. I then head over to the Cave of Origin, where I manage to catch a Magmar. I then head down to the bottom floor of the cave and quickly do the Kyogre event. After that, I head over to the Pokemon Center and then enter the gym. Upon entering the gym, I easily complete all 3 puzzles on my first try and immediately begin the fight with Wallace, leading Slacking, who easily one-shots his first 2 Pokemon. He then sends out an Aggron, so I decide to switch into Blaziken, who manages to finish it off with a double kick. He then brings out a Skarmory, so I switch into Slowbro, who easily takes it out after a few surfs. His Magmar is then brought out, so I decide to switch into Slacking, who kills it and his last Pokemon with Tri-Attack, giving us our final badge. Now that I've beat Wallace, I quickly head back to the Pokemon Center and replace Blaziken with Magmar. After that, I head over to Route 128, which directly leads into the southern side of Evergrande City, where I catch an Altaria. I then go up the waterfall, heal up, and then go right into Victory Road.
After entering Victory Road, I quickly take out the 3 or 4 Force Trainers and then eventually reach Wally, who I begin the fight with, leading Slacking, who, well, kind of just one-shots his entire team. Regardless, we have now reached the Elite Four. Now, to be honest, the Elite Four in this case was incredibly underwhelming and went about as well as you'd expect it to, as Slacking managed to sweep Sydney and Phoebe very easily. Glacia was also a very easy fight that was mostly swept by Slacking, but Slowbro did kill her last Pokemon, Aggron. Drake and Steven were also again swept by Slacking, and while I know that's a very anticlimactic ending, we have now finished this challenge. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And before this video ends, I'm going to play a quick montage of all the notable failed attempts of this challenge.